Here with this week's hottest stories in the investment world, this is Zach's Friday Finish Line.
Hello and welcome to the Zach's Friday Finish Line. My name is Ryan McQueeney. We're going to be doing things a little bit differently this week. For longtime listeners of the show, you know that intro was a little bit different. I do not have my co-host Maddie Johnson next to me. She is actually out of town for the day. So a bit of a different show, kind of a rerun if you do listen to my own Tech Talk Tuesday show on Tuesdays every week. We are going to be rerunning an interview that I did this week with a gentleman named Paul McGough. He is the founder and chief technology officer of Quiet LLC. We talked about mostly the cybersecurity industry. Paul is a telecommunications expert with over 35 years of experience in the business. His company, Quiet, they developed a platform called Quiet Talk, which is a security as a service solution that allows other communications products to add secure private messaging to their own platforms. Paul was a great interview, great conversation about kind of the history of cybersecurity, what we've learned from these really public breaches and hacks of personal information, what the consumer should know about the privacy of their own data and their own information, who we can trust, who we can't trust, and then kind of some trends that should be emerging here in the future. So apologies for no traditional Friday Finish Line this week. I know it was a busy week, a lot of macroeconomic news coming out, a lot of things to eventually discuss about trade and tariffs. Are there tariffs? Are there not tariffs? Is there a trade war? Is there not a trade war? I'm sure we will cover all of that in next week's Friday Finish Line. But again, here is this interview for those who might have missed it. We hope you enjoy it, and we will see you next week. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I'd like to cover a few of the basics. We always hear about these massive data breaches and hacks, but I'm not sure that the average person really knows how this is going down on the ground level. Where are these attacks coming from? What type of information is at risk? And how the heck does it keep happening?
Ryan, the main thing to think about when you think about these attacks and that you hear about on the net, you hear, cryptocurrencies for $500 million and Experian for 140 million records. And I think just yesterday or the day before, they announced, oh, by the way, there's another 2.5 million records of people's data that was stolen. These are organized, we used to use the term organized crime, and it meant the mafia. What it really means is these aren't smash and grab jobs. These are organized attacks by, whether it's foreign governments or criminal entities, et cetera. These are groups that get together and have a purpose for either making money or doing something that's a little bit wrong with the data that they collect. So they have to be organized. That's where they mostly come from. You read about the one-off of getting your identity stolen. And Ryan, by the way, I've had my identity stolen. And so the one-off attacks are just things the same as a stolen wallet. But these large ones are organized efforts to make those things happen. And the type of information, Ryan, it's anything that has value. So, cryptocurrencies and financial data, social security numbers, all of those pieces of information that make you, valuable to the world. They're not going to steal at you so that they can go in and come and be on your job. We will kind of know that you don't look like Ryan, so when you show, they're not doing that, but they're stealing all the data that has value. And of course, that's financial. And the things that they want to do with it is they want long term. Like I said, these aren't smash and grab jobs. They don't want to just take your credit card and use it for the first hour that it might be available at the mall. They want to be able to get and become you for months at a time. So the type of information is definitely financial, personal, so that they can be you. And how the heck does it keep happening, Ryan? The reason it keeps happening, I'm reminded of a story that happened a couple of years ago. The University of Maryland's graduate school was broken into. And you can imagine what's in personal student records. There's all kinds of history there and financial data, addresses, parents' social security numbers. It's devastating data. And they interviewed the president, and he said, well, and I'm paraphrasing, you can probably go on YouTube and find it. And he said, well, it's kind of unfortunate because we just upgraded to the latest and greatest best practices for cybersecurity products and procedures, and then we were broken into, so I guess we'll have to double our efforts. And I immediately thought, Ryan, does that mean we're going to use twice as much ineffective stuff, or are we just going to try twice as hard to put the ineffective stuff that we've got in more places? So the bottom line of how it keeps happening, Ryan, these systems are massive, they're complex, and they allow access. Organized efforts for doing this is all about getting there, being there, planning it, and then executing it. And executing isn't smash and grab. It's over time. It's over months. And so the reason it keeps happening is because people can get in there, they can stay in there, they can swim around in these large networks unseen. That's how it keeps happening.
Well, it's an interesting question that you posed, especially in that example where the school has just recently upgraded, and I think this leads me really well to the next question I have here, because this is obviously something that has very slowly creeped into our national attention since the advent of the internet, and especially since more things like personal finance and e-commerce, where there's more sensitive information on the internet. But in the grand scheme of things, all of this this idea of cybersecurity being an issue really is pretty new compared to some of the other security issues we might have in our everyday lives. But as we've kind of seen this progress, what have we learned from these attacks so far, and what kinds of noticeable changes have been made in this industry?
Well, the first thing that we've learned is everything's a pyramid, right? Imagine that iceberg in the Titanic. These are when you hear about 140 million records at Experian, it's the tip of the iceberg. That means right now, today, they're swimming around inside of networks doing other things in just as large an effort. So what we've learned is that these things are ongoing, they keep happening, and we try to move down the pyramid to get as much data as we can about, how things are happening. So at the top of the pyramid, Ryan, would be something like, okay, the reason it happened is because the people who were tasked with keeping your data, secure, they just thought if they lock the front door, everything's good, and that, they don't need actual vaults and safety deposit boxes in the back. They can just put everything on the shelf. Okay, so you have places that are being, that were being attacked because they just weren't doing enough. Okay, so we move down the next level of the pyramid and we say, okay, so now we've got, the next level says, okay, these are people that are trying to do stuff. What have they tried? Where are they trying to patch these networks? Are they patching them from access through, inside jobs, or are these kind of all outside jobs? So now let's go down the pyramid again and say, what do we need to do to tighten up the security for the inside job? Well, we need to do things like tie you to your identifier, your token. It's not just that you can have an employee password and username and password, Ryan. We've got to get you maybe a second factor. You know what I mean? We've got to get two-factor, and that we're not going to store that second factor. So we're pretty sure that Ryan had to be the one who logged in with that username and password. Somebody didn't just get it off the yellow sticky in front of you. So we move down the pyramid and we try to do, okay, so if they're coming from the outside, are they coming in from legacy systems? Is there an old system that somebody got and put some, malicious code in that got access, 2 months, 3 months down the road because they were purging or doing something with an old data? So you start to learn more about the ways that these systems can be attacked. But along with that, Ryan, as we're learning more and moving down the pyramid, now you have cryptocurrency exchanges. Those didn't exist 5 years ago,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, definitely.
So as we go down the pyramid and we learn more about each phase of what can be done and what's happening and what we need to do to provide either products or services or technology, we all of a sudden we have to now apply it to do new and different places, and that's where the changes have been made. Is that the products that we're trying to build and the protocols that we're trying to put in place for security access are we're trying to make them better. There's a kind of a little asterisk, though, next to that, Ryan, is that some of the things I think that my industry is doing, the cybersecurity industry, are a little bit backwards, and I wish we were going in the other direction. An example of that is you have a new credit card, don't you, with the smart card on it?
The chip, yeah, definitely.
Sure. So the way we used to process credit cards, the magnetic stripe in the back, and it has some data, and you'd swipe it, and a couple of things would happen. The reader would go and process the transaction back, and the number of things that happen, I'm not going to get them right because I don't have it up in front of me, right in front of Google, but we're going to say about anywhere from like 4 to 6 things happen. Well, now that we're doing the smart chip, we have about 10 to 12 things that are happening. Now, to me, that's going the wrong way. We need to go from 4 to 6 down to 1 to 2. Not from 4 to 6 to 10 to 12, and so part of what we're doing, the crypto security, when we're trying to make these changes, is some of the things that we're offering or whatever are getting more complex, and they're following the same, they're making more access for that organized criminal to be able to get inside. So we have learned, and we are applying, and things are tightening up from an inside job perspective, and things are tightening up from some access places. But in other areas, we still have a lot of work to do.
So is your basic premise there that the more steps in the process, the more opportunities there are for one of those steps to be vulnerable to a mistake or a hack or an attack?
Yes, and that's well known. We have a tendency, in cryptography, and is that complexity doesn't equal security doesn't equal security. You can't just make something more complex and make it more difficult. That's like stenography, where they try to put a symbol inside of a picture. Ryan, have you heard about
like cheat code puzzles?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Exactly, just like that. And it's no matter how you do it, you can kind of somewhat at some level you get down and you can tell the difference, between what it's supposed to be and what it's not. Okay, so obscurity just doesn't really work. And yes, that is one of my premises, and the part of what we're trying to do with Quiet is to go that other direction. Another example, along with the credit card one, is TLS. TLS is that locked browser in your browser and your server, HTTPS, right? You know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the TLS is the number one public, worldwide crypto protocol. It's the place is used everywhere. You use a browser to go in here, and it's kind of replaced VPNs and a couple of other things. Certain companies and organizations who have a lot of outside access, put a second layer of things. But a lot of people just use browsers and things to go in there. So TLS is there. It's been around for 22 years, and it still only has a 75% penetration rate. Right? If you go to Google and type in, how much traffic is going on the internet and how much is secure, it's around 75%. So in 22 years, we've only penetrated 75%. And Ryan, part of that problem is because it isn't because TLS isn't a good protocol. It isn't a good way to make sure that Ryan is Ryan when he connects through his web browser. It's that the performance is kind of slow. The methods we have underneath it that are being used inside of TLS they're reaching the end of their life. They're too slow. So the new version of TLS that's being put out today, it hasn't been changed in 8 years. It's version 1.2, and it's being proposed, and it's called 0-RTT, which is 0 round trips. What they're trying to do, Ryan, is they're trying to extend how often you actually do parts of the TLS protocol from, instead of doing it once per session, maybe now once every 3 sessions or 5 sessions. I think, again, that's going the wrong way. We want to try to authenticate you every transmission, Ryan.
Sure.
So TLS is going the wrong way. And the reason it's going the wrong way, Ryan, is because they're trying to get more people to use it, trying to get from 75% up to 100%, which is great. That's a great and worthy and noble goal. Unfortunately, we're kind of degrading the security to try to get there because we have secondary issues. So what we try to do at Quiet is we're trying to go the other way. We're trying to do things that are more efficient, that are smaller, that you can do more often, because we think that's direction to go. That's to stop this, these massive and obviously costly invasions in these complex networks. Is you got to provide end-to-end security, and you need to do it with some new types of methods. That's what we need.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. moving on a little bit here, I think we've started touching on this a bit, but I want to focus on some of the businesses that are really threatened by these breaches and these attacks that we've been talking about. A few, obviously, that come up when I look at major figures, going to be industries like financial services and e-commerce. Can I trust all of these companies? Are they actually taking care of my information? Should I feel comfortable with these businesses?
Right, in the group of people I hang around with, we have a saying. We go, "Let me think about it for a second." No. So let me think about it. No. The answer is no. And now here's the thing, right? Okay, all of these organizations and companies realize that they have to trade off convenience for risk. Okay, there's no reason that Home Depot lost 10 million records in their break-in a couple years back. Do you remember that 10 million credit card records?
Yeah.
The only reason Home Depot has them, they don't have them so that they can pay off their suppliers with your credit card. They have them so that it's convenient for you to click, use my card, and
Right.
go through. So they're all of these e-commerce and financial services are always trying to find a balance between risk, convenience, the reward for the customer, because customer acquisition, this is a business. E-commerce and financial services, Ryan, they're in business, and customer acquisition and customer maintenance costs, they go through the roof, okay? And there's so much competition, et cetera. So they try to balance those, and unfortunately, one of the places that they may cut corners is they may say, I think we're doing that good enough. Nothing's happened so far, so that's probably good enough. Let's just stay with that. And if you use that kind of attitude with, as we've just discussed about all the new ways that there is to access, and you don't move down the pyramid of trying to learn what's happening and trying to put those new products in place, what you need to do is, Ryan, you should be diligent. So you can trust them, but you've got to keep track of your stuff, okay? When I mentioned before that my identity was stolen, really quickly, Ryan, the way they stole it is one of my credit cards was breached, but they didn't go and run to the mall with it. They did a change of address for $1 through the USPS. What they were trying to do was change my address, and they put it in for 20 days for just the first-class mail. Then they opened up 4 credit cards in my name, and then they were going to have them for 20 days. I wouldn't have even noticed my mail was missing,
Sure.
right? Because I'm still getting my junk mail. So the methods that they can use are this wide, complex access, and it's up to you and me to be diligent about those things. So you can trust them, but don't store your credit card at the Home Depot. Type it in, and put alerts up on your credit card. I have alerts all over the place now, right? Nobody can use any of my accounts or any of my credit cards or whatever without me knowing, and do it all the way to the financial services, including Experian, et cetera. So you should trust in digital commerce, okay? You have to. This is today's world. You need it. It works, okay? We're all busy. We're all doing things, so you need to have confidence in it. But for trust, make sure that you participate just as much.
Sure, definitely. And I think what's nice growing up in my generation is that we've kind of all been aware of the sensitivities of these issues almost our entire lives. So it feels like the things that we've been learning and the advancements that we've been making and the best practices that have come into the forefront of our attention have really been like as I've been growing up. So it's been definitely useful to learn as we go. And I want to kind of shift it. You were touching on this definitely. I want to wrap things up here by asking one more question about how this works, more from the corporate level than the individual level. When we're talking about these companies that we're kind of putting some trust into, whether it be a financial services company or e-commerce marketplace or whatever, are we seeing more activity from these companies in terms of supplying or purchasing or finding response services and kind of things that help them to respond to potential hacks? Or are we seeing people invest more in protective services? And I guess what I'm trying to get at there is there maybe a problem with the way that companies are approaching it right now, and that they're willing to wait and spend money on responding to the incident instead of investing in the protection?
Yes, that's 100% correct. I would say that companies definitely respond too late. When we talk about inside and outside jobs or whatever, Brian, remember, this is organized activity, and it takes a while. Inside jobs and outside jobs have a different profile, and they have a different length of time. Outside jobs, access is generally somewhere between like 18 and 24 months. If you're talking about people who have access and these crimes go on for that long period of time. Inside jobs are 36 months and greater. So they're even longer because they go slow and they take more and do things. So companies' focuses aren't enough, and these things, they happen so infrequently, and you always think just like, an accident in your car, you think it'll happen to the other guy, not me, And so companies are probably not doing enough in both regards, both protective and response, but definitely they're relying on their best practice, just like that president at the University of Maryland, on their protective services and saying we're doing enough, and then response is always a kind of catch can, let's grab it and try and put the genie back in the bottle. And so I think that there's definitely some room for improvement in both of those areas, but definitely in terms of response.
Awesome. Thank you for your insights there, and for the rest of the valuable insights that you've shared with us today. Our audience is typically kind of individual investors, and what we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years is cybersecurity kind of explode into Wall Street and become one of our most hot button kind of industries or sectors to follow. Yep. And we have all these names and these tickers out that are publicly traded, and I feel like they get lumped under this cybersecurity umbrella, and a lot of investors don't really know what the product is or why the product is even necessary or how it works. So to hear kind of more about the nitty gritty and how things are going on down on really the ground level, I think is super helpful for our listeners to really learn more about what they're investing in. So thank you for joining us. Paul, it was a great talk, and we hope to speak to you again soon.
Ryan, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Investors interested in some different strategies in this industry should check out the First Trust NASDAQ Cybersecurity ETF, which is traded under the ticker CYBR, CIBR, as well as the Pure Funds ISE Cybersecurity ETF, and that's traded under the ticker HACK, HACK. As a reminder, if you feel that we missed something or if you want us to cover a different story, feel free to shoot us an email at podcast@zacks.com. Make sure to check out all of our other audio content at zacks.com/podcast. And remember to subscribe and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. As always, thanks again for listening to the Zacks Tech Talk Tuesday podcast. We will see you next time.